even though people don't want to sell, they have to sell.
I've talked to multiple sellers this week that are delisting their house due to not being able to get their price. In fact, we just helped someone list their house for rent because of this. And yet, listings are growing at a faster pace than they did last year. This is a softer summer than last year. Sellers aren't getting the price and they're choosing to delist, but active listings are growing. I think we're witnessing a dramatic shift to a buyer's market. Now, I know some of you will want to dismiss this as just a seasonal shift into the summer, and I would disagree, but we have to put all the pieces together. Glenn Kelman, Redfin's CEO.
Yeah, rich people are always going to be rich. They don't give a crap.
Besides being hilarious, he has some of the most robust real-time housing data of anyone on the planet. And he actually said some things about the housing market that we need to pay attention to, including where prices could go. Now, in June of 2022, when interest rates doubled, we saw demand drop by 30%. Transaction volume came to a standstill and has never recovered. Now, for Nashville, this meant going from almost 38,000 single-family homes sold in 2021 to 26,000 in 2023. Despite this dramatic drop in demand, it's actually still dropping. Contract volume is currently 3% lower than where it was at this time last year.
And most people, rather than putting their home up for sale when there was very little demand, just held it off the market.
Sellers have been locked into their houses because of mortgage rates. So while people point to new listings being low as if it's somehow evidence that the housing market won't deteriorate, the lack of demand is even worse. It is starting to show.
And now they're starting to say, wow, I don't know when it's going to get better, and I just have to move.
We may be beginning to see signs that sellers are caving.
A lot of our customers are folks who got a divorce last year, and the husband and the wife are driving each other crazy. Or, they own a townhouse and they've had a third child and they're just bursting at the seams. So they put it off as long as they could. But housing is at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. It's a basic human need. And so at some point, even though people don't want to sell, they have to sell.
And this is the point. Sellers who don't have to sell are taking their house off the market, leaving sellers that do have to sell. And despite the low new listing volume, the demand is even lower. This is causing active listings to skyrocket, and it's leaving some pretty wild conversations that realtors are having with their customers.
Homes getting delisted because they can't sell. Almost every real estate broker is having conversations with home sellers about when you're going to mark this property down so we can get it to move.
The ones who want it to move have to drop their price. And we are starting to see this dramatically in Nashville. Williamson County, which had a much stronger spring than last year, has since shifted rapidly, and now price cuts as a percentage of active listings are rising above last year's level. Given that they started at a much lower point, this shift is dramatic. But it's too easy just to say sellers are giving up. This isn't everywhere, and it's not at every price point. In fact, Glenn did have a few comments about luxury.
Luxury is holding up a little bit better. Sometimes actually there's a higher beta on luxury properties. So typically there's been a real shortage of starter homes in America, and that's been compounded by the fact that investors have been so active in competing with first-time home buyers for that inventory. Except now those investors who are using borrowed money have been squeezed by higher interest rates themselves. So we're seeing less speculation in the middle of the market, and the luxury market's holding up better.
This suggests that there could be more volatility than average heading this way. Now, with price cuts, it's becoming obvious that home values are going to drop. This could actually be faster than average, likely somewhere between 2022, where we saw a rapid 10% drop, and 2023, where it was a much milder and less volatile 4% drop. And he does call out the middle market.
The middle end of the market, or the middle part of the market, that had been the hottest part of the market until about 6 months ago. And now that's significantly softened.
Glenn was talking about the middle market. Now, I took a chart for a 300 price point to to 700, all right? That's 200 below the median, 200 above the median. This would be the middle market. I guess probably even a little bit skewed to low side. 300 is pretty low. But check this out. These are the reduced active listings. So the number of active listings that have been reduced. Notice the beginning of this year, very, very muted compared to last year. And then it went vertical. Price cuts went vertical starting in May, and they've been shooting up ever since. Now compare that to the active listings. Active listings have been shooting up since March. Again, look, we were stronger in the spring, and then starting in April, active listings for that 300 to 700 price band began to shoot up vertical. And the last thing I want to show you is the demand. It's been lower since February. We have a demand of about 1,600 versus 1,750 last year. That's a 150 drop off. That's about a 10% drop in demand, while active listings are just skyrocketing. We have 3,700 active listings as of this morning. Last year, we were like 3,000. This is also the price point where many FHA homes sit. People are very over leveraged when they're only putting 3.5% down at these interest rates. And the gap between mortgage payment and rent are extremely large. And this brings me to the conclusion that I sit with today. Luxury may have a higher beta. It may drop more and faster than lower priced housing. It's certainly possible. It seems to me that it's in a much better spot than the lower priced housing, where demand is struggling, price drops are soaring, and the risk of defaults are much, much higher. So in Nashville, that's the 300 to 700 range. There's a lot of good assumable homes in that price range. And I think I would be very careful about buying without some kind of value hack, like mortgage assumption. And you want to make sure that your mortgage payment is lower than rent rates. That may mean putting higher than average down payment down. You know, in the luxury, the new builds are putting pressure on crazy prices. And that's the biggest competition. There's plenty of demand. There's plenty of money. It's just nicer houses being built down the street can crush home values. And we are seeing that in many neighborhoods. So I suppose every market in every area has their risk. But if you do want to own a home, just pay attention to the data. Buy something you can afford and be careful. By the way, this interview was on David Lynn's channel. It's a fantastic interview. It's about 30 minutes. I'll put a link in the description because it's really worth your time listening. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next Saturday.